Oh, how do I do that?
Peace and love, family. How is everyone doing? Thank you for joining us on another edition of the RAM Book Club, Resurgence of the African Mind, where we seek to liberate African minds by reading one unit of work at a time. I am Lily La Poete Speaks. You can find my poetry. You can find my blog at lilylapoetespeaks.com. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to get into this book. Finally, we're going to let the rest of the panel introduce themselves. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Peace and love. This is your sister, Dr. Maat. I'm happy to be on the panel, and as Sister Alima said, discussing another book, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. I mean, this book is a very small book. It's a short book, 68 pages, but it's packed with a lot of powerful information. And I'm gonna be glad to discuss that information tonight, and just to hear like the different perspectives. You know, when I read some things, I jotted down some notes. And so I have my perspective on what Dr. Naim Akbar was trying to convey, at least in this first part, psychological legacy of slavery. So I'm just interested in hearing other people's perspective on the information that he presented. Peace and love.
So I'm Amin, and I'm here for the first time, and this is going to be a great experience, I do believe. I don't have the book, as I said before, but I'm really ingratiated to be able to listen and learn. Okay,
Hotep, and happy for you to learn and to come on the panel to share your perspective, brother, on the information that's being disseminated. So we're happy to have you, my brother.
Yes.
Brother Kanoum, I see you are in the building. Brother Kanoum.
Yes, how are you doing today?
Oh, peace and love to you, Brother Kanoum. How are you?
Doing excellent. I am ready, willing, and able.
All right, family. All right, so let me go ahead and put the link in the live link in our book club Facebook group chat. All right, so let's kick it off, Sister Alima. I'm gonna go ahead and send the link out and let folks know that we're live. But let's go ahead and kick it off. Psychological legacy. Of slavery, part 1.
Okay, well, since you know you got the physical copy and I got
the yes.
I don't know if I can click to the link. You know, I don't know if it's gonna kick me off.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll go ahead and spark it off. Well, Brother Jefferson, can you start it off? Because I know you have a copy of it, but can you start it off while I send out the link to get more folks in the chat?
Absolutely. You just want me to start reading? Is that what you want, or just hit the highlights?
We're going to highlight it and kind of just discuss it. Okay. We're not going to, and if there's something that you want to emphasize, something that you want to read, something that stood out, then, you know, you're more than happy to read it. But we don't want this to be a thing where we're just reading the book aloud. Like, we want this to kind of be more of a discussion.
Okay. Excellent. So if we're starting with the first chapter that says psychological legacy.
Yes.
Legacy of slavery. I want to highlight in the first paragraph, about the third paragraph down, it still says, we still carry the scars of this experience in both our social and mental lives. And that's important to realize, that you cannot heal something until you acknowledge that you have a problem. There's no way you can do that. So we still carry the scars, and he kind of breaks it down in the previous chapters and everything, but we still have those same scars. We still eat slave food. We still have the mindset of, some of the things he's going to cover later, of being like master. So we have to overcome that mindset. And he even breaks it down even more. Dr. Clark observes that social scientists would object to the discussion of slavery as a cause of contemporary behavior, because it happened so long ago. But even the effects of what happened to our ancestors is still affecting us today. And that's why Sankofa is so important. We have to look back into the past, acknowledge the hurt and pain that we've had, and then look forward to the future and say, hey, guess what? We're going to be the generation of change. Plain and simple. We're not going to allow this to affect us anymore, and we're going to be the generation of change.
Absolutely. And brother, like you said, I'm still in the first paragraph with you when Dr. Naim Akbar talks about or states that psychologists and sociologists have failed to attend, he says, to the persistence of problems in our mental and social lives, which clearly have roots in slavery. He says only the historian has given proper attention to the shattering realities of slavery, and he has dealt with it only as a descriptive, as descriptive of past events. But that has definitely changed. I wanted to point that out. You have people like Dr. Joy Dugary, who wrote a book about post-traumatic slave syndrome. Okay, so we have that text that talks about, you know, the psychological impact that slavery has on us, or has on us today. I know that there's a field of study in science called epigenetics, where it talks about how trauma is passed down from generation to generation and how trauma can alter your genes. So, you know, I know that Dr. Naeem wrote this book back in 89 or something like that. I think that was the first copy. And then he brought out another version, I believe, like in the 90s and then in the early 2000s. But, you know, since this has been in print, I do want to bring to the people's attention that, you know, we do have people who are looking at this and who are studying the psychological impact that slavery has on us.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so he does mention Clark, which you stated, Brother Kanoum, and he says that Clark argues that slavery, more than any other single event, has shaped the mentality of the present African American. And as you stated so eloquently, Brother Kanoum, when you look at the things that we eat, our behavior, the things that we say, it's evident that we still carry with us the vestiges of slavery. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I think you said it perfectly well, Queen, but it is evident. I mean, even from the way we dress and the way we, you know what I mean, do our hair, and the people that we pray to, I mean, it all stems down from slavery, as you stated.
Absolutely. And Dr. Naeem Akbar also, at the bottom of like the third page, he points out that slavery should be viewed as a starting point for understanding the African American psyche, and not as an endpoint. So we're not saying that we're just going to study slavery to diagnose the psyche of African American people. He's saying that let's just use this as a starting point.
Yeah, correct.
Absolutely.
What is it about? Oh, go ahead, Queen.
Oh no, go ahead, Queen. You go ahead.
He was also talking about the way that we feel about work and the negative connotations that work has with us. How did you all feel about that? Because to a certain extent, I never really thought about it in that manner, to be honest with you, but it makes sense.
And I'm with you, Queen. When I read it, I was like, do we hate work? And then initially I was getting a little, not offended, but I was like, no, that's the perception that Black people are lazy. We do work. And then, you know, so that's where my mind went. But I'm with you, Queen. I started thinking about how we stopped doing certain jobs and how we looked at certain jobs as being beneath us. How nowadays we want instantaneous or instant gratification. So I thought about that. But then I started thinking, well, isn't that the culture that we live in at this point? It's not just like African Americans. It's really like the overall culture. So you see that not only in Black youth, but you see it even European youth, you know, Asian youth. It just seems like that's the overall culture now. Get it now. You know, we want, like I said, instantaneous or instant gratification. Get it now. Get it now. And so I was thinking it's not really just African Americans at this point. It's everybody. It's kind of ingrained in the culture in a sense.
I agree with that.
Sometimes I look at how we accept the norm, if you will, of how society acts today, and we can't really act the way that others act when we reject a type of work, and we relate it to slavery. For example, farming. We don't look at farming as a necessity. We look at it as akin to slavery. We look at it as akin to working in a field instead of looking at it as a means to our own survival. We interpret things from the viewpoint of the others.
Yes.
I agree with that.
I agree wholeheartedly with that, brother.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. So we equate that to, like you said, hard work, and we're like, you know, I don't want to do that, you know. So, you know, so we abandon, like you said, our farms. We don't view farming as, like you said, a necessity.
And it is.
It absolutely is.
Exactly. It absolutely is.
But you know, That's the overall part of what we're studying. Is they removed our culture and injected their culture into our minds. And all those things that we know we should be doing is foreign to us now, but we know we're coming out of that. It's just amazing when you think about it.
Are we
Absolutely.
coming out of it at a pace that's consistent with the rest of society, or are we moving? Are we trying to stay in step with society? I'm wondering.
Well, that's a bigger picture. We really have to get back to educating our own children.
Mm-hmm.
Because even as Dr. Marimba
Yes.
says, that culture is the inoculator against this society.
Mm.
You know, and
Yes.
she is so wise in saying that. And we're not educating our children yet. We're still sending them, to the colonizers, and we get all their ideas from cartoons. I was going to cover some of that in detail. From Sesame Street, all that stuff is indoctrination. But in the African culture, when you're from a certain age to a teenager, you're around certain people, and we've lost that. This is like, for lack of a better word, this is a cultural war.
Mm-hmm.
That's so true. As Malik El Shabbat said, that why would
Yeah.
we allow another race to educate? Why would you allow your enemy to educate your children?
Say it again.
That's a
Wow.
quote no one likes.
Say it again.
I remember you posted that, Queen, on you posted that on Facebook when everyone was quoting Malcolm X's for his birthday.
Mhm.
They were quoting that, and you said, "Hold up, they left this one out," and you posted it.
Every year, they never quote that one unless it's like an actual homeschooler educator. They never quote that one. I'm like, that's convenient. Why you don't quote that though?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so then I love how he points out how, work in a natural society is looked upon with pride.
Mm-hmm.
So in a natural society, we look upon it as pride because we're working to build our families. We're working to sustain our families. Right. And so it's looked upon with pride. He says both because it permits persons to express themselves and because it supplies their survival needs. So that's in a natural society, So like you said, the brother Canoe, we have literally adopted their culture. And because of slavery, we view work as, we view it with disdain, to work for what? I'm not working. So we do have a negative perception about it. He says African Americans still to a great extent hate work. It says work is identified with punishment, is equated with inferiority. Think about the hustlers in the neighborhood. You have a lot of young children looking up to them, and they say, "Work? I don't go to work. I'm out here doing this." That's hard stuff. You're going to work for somebody. Look, man, I'm doing this. It's easy. It's fast money, and so we gravitate, if you notice, to these get rich quick schemes. In the community, and we end up actually getting got a lot of times when we try to get involved in these get rich quick schemes. So he says that we rely on gambling, get rich schemes. He says some of the difficulty that we experience in generating independent business and institutions is because of our hatred of work. What do you all think about that? So he's saying basically we're not even involved in institution building because of our perception of work. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's more so we've become very complacent in another group of people supplying our needs? What do you think? Brother Canoe?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's a little bit of both.
That's
It's a
what I
little bit of
think.
both. Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of both because it takes responsibility to educate your children. Even with my own children, there's certain things, certain books that I've have them read. Period. That's just the bottom line. You have to read this. You have to understand what real history is, not the stuff that they teach you in school. And it's just like welfare. The most welfare recipients are third or fourth generation. So what does that mean? That means that we've gotten so complacent in allowing other people to educate our children that we accept it. We accept our children going to jail from school. We accept police brutality. We've accepted all these things, and we've become complacent in that. And it's time for a change. It is time for a change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I'm trying to think, is there anything else he said in here that I thought about that was powerful to me? He also mentioned the vast shortage of jobs and many other obstacles. to receiving the same benefits from work as do other members of the society may give us a negative perception of work. He says, in addition, the society itself has developed such a leisure orientation that work has become something to be disguised by all members. And then lastly, he says, like, our slang, our songs, our jokes, our attitudes transmitted from one generation to the next preserve those reactions, or these reactions, as if they were acquired yesterday. So moving on to property. What about how we view property, how we view materials? What are your thoughts on that, panel?
I want to read the very first sentence in the property.
Okay.
The slave was permitted to own nothing. You can just stop right there. The slaves were not permitted to own nothing, but you see the impact of our great great grandparents. Even though they did not have a college education, they bought land. I have hundreds of friends that talk about the land that their grandparents bought, and I tell them, don't you ever sell that land, because they understood that if you have land, just like the ancient Comedics teach, if you have land, you can sustain your family. But most of us now, we just work jobs, but we don't own land to be able to sustain our family. And that I just said that was just so powerful that they were not able to own anything at all or very little. Same difference.
I think that uh, for just on behalf of us as a people, we have to understand that they created the Homestead Act in the 1700s and gave them land. Uh, if you
Yes.
could walk off land, it was yours. If you worked it for 5 years, it was yours. They created generational wealth. While in the 12 years of Reconstruction after the so-called end of slavery, we caught them and in some cases surpassed them all over the country. What they
Yeah.
did was they destroyed our advancements, they destroyed our successes, and then they erased it from history so that we would not know. In our own defense, many of us don't know how well we did, and because we don't know how well we did, we don't know how well we can do.
Yes, and that's true. As a matter of fact, many of the records were purposely burned because it was recorded at one time in many church houses and many courthouses about the land that the Africans owned back then. But like you said, they burned down the cities, and then they burned down the records to prove that so that you cannot prove that you owned your own land. Those- and we have to overcome that treachery. We just have to overcome that because we know this is the country we live in, and we know how they roll.
Yes,
Abs-
many of
absolutely.
us know a lot about Rosewood, and we know about Black Wall Street, but we don't know how many other uh, very successful towns there were all over the
Yes,
East and West, North and South. This entire
yes,
country, we had pockets of cities where we were extremely successful, and in each case they were murdered en masse. They were burned out and everything was taken from them. And the first thing that they destroyed was the printing press so that it could not be recorded and could not be passed down. And we have not, because we don't know who we were, again, and I guess I'm being repetitive, because we don't know who we were, we don't know who we can be.
I agree.
yes, 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 yes. And then I'll move over to. I got to read something else.
I agree. I agree 200%. I also, when I read this section, I thought he talked about vandalism. Hey, yeah, hold on. I got you. Can you hear me, brother?
I can, yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hear me, or do I sound choppy?
I think you were choppy for a moment, but you should be good now.
Okay, you can hear me? Yeah, because I was talking to you, brother Kaneem, when I asked if you could hear me. Because I was talking, and I know you started saying something, so I was like, "Oh my goodness, am I like delayed or something like that?"
No, you should be good.
You said what, Queen?
Oh, nothing. Go ahead, sis.
All right. I hope that okay, cool. All right. Well, it was another thing that Okay, cool. All right. So there was another thing he mentioned when he talked about property. He talked about vandalism. And he said, some of our tendencies towards vandalism and abuse of property have their origin in these experiences with property. So he's saying that property is viewed as belonging to the master and not to the slave. And so um, when I thought about the riots that were going on and how they were burning down, burning businesses in communities, I've heard people say, I'm gonna burn it down because we don't own it. So people were okay with vandalism. You get what I'm saying? They're like, well, we don't own it. They own it. It belongs to them. And so people burned it down. And so when he said that, our abuse of property, and vandalism, he said it has its roots in slavery. So what did you all think about that, and how he says that vandalism is unconsciously, he said, gratifying in that it acts out the long present resentment of the master's property. So what are your thoughts on that with regards to like the rioters and what we've been seeing since the George Floyd protest?
I think to a certain extent that might be true, because a lot of times you hear people say, well, I mean, we don't own those businesses. I mean, they got insurance. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really care. Even if they say, why do you burn the businesses in your community? And that's the same retort, is that we don't own it. So maybe a part of that is that,
Exactly.
I never pondered on that before reading it, but maybe.
Yeah, because all that stored up anger, all that anger from being denied jobs, from being denied opportunities. For if you go to a place and you try to get a job, and they say no to you so many times, but other groups are building businesses left and right. All of a sudden, you've got a problem.
As a product of the 50s, born in the 50s, I remember well the riots of the 60s, and I wonder, did the baby boomers, did my generation drop the ball when we failed to publicize and voice our understanding that we made a mistake when we did the burn baby burn thing in 68, when we destroyed all of our own communities. We left that, and today's generations in some ways exalt that, and they think that it's a good thing to burn baby burn. We did not share with them that we destroyed our communities, and those communities became a blight, became an eyesore, became a ruin for 30 years.
Mm.
We didn't tell them. We have to take our responsibility when we point the finger, because we did not make them aware that we made a mistake. And they went back and repeated that mistake. You would think it was insanity, but they don't realize it was a mistake.
Mm. I never thought of that.
And then same here. And then also he talks about how, because slaves weren't permitted to own anything, nothing, or very little, he said again to lust after the master's belongings. So his house, his beautiful landscaping, his clothes, his objects. And so we lusted after that. What I automatically went to Black celebrities when I read that paragraph. And I thought about how when we do accumulate money, the first thing we go after is the material things. We might come from impoverished neighborhoods. And so instead of taking that money and saying, okay, let me go and develop our communities, what we do is we say, we're going to chase the master's clothes. We're going to get his jewelry. So when you look at a lot of the hip hop, the guys got the big jewelry on. I'm going to flex. I got my name brand bag. I got this, I got that. And so we tend to go after his possessions, or these worldly possessions, these things that have been dangling in our face that we couldn't afford when we were at a certain social economic status. But once we reached, that social economic status and we can afford it, that's the first thing we go after, rather than develop our community. So I thought about that when he talked about that we go after the master's house. So we want the big house, we want all of these things, but look at our communities and look at where we came from. We didn't take that money and develop. And I'm not gonna say we didn't, because I don't know what celebrities are doing with their money, but I can speak for Baltimore, and how I know Jada Pinkett, she did come in town. She dropped a few million at a school called the School of the Arts. Carmelo Anthony did to the Creation Center in Baltimore, and then they did that, and they were gone. And so again, we in my opinion, we take the money, we go after these luxury things, but we leave our communities behind because yeah. So we in a sense become extremely materialistic.
Yes, yes,
Is
yes, yes.
that brother Kanoum?
Go ahead, Brother Kadum.
Yes, brother Kanoum. Is that related to then what you were saying
The Kadum, can you hear
about
me?
Yes, I can hear you.
brother
Go ahead.
brother
Yeah.
Kanoum? Is that then related to you say we were talking about the effects of our ancestors' pain? Is that is that related to the transgenerational epigenetic trauma that we experience today? Because we don't understand where our actions stem from. We don't realize that because we didn't have something back then
Exactly.
that was trauma, and now we're acting it out today because of the things that we didn't have caused pain then. We're still experiencing the same pain and frustration today.
Mm.
Would that be close?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, it, it is there's so many dynamics to it, right? There's so many dynamics to it because, like you said, all of a sudden you become a rap artist. You want to get the Gucci, the Gucci upholstery in your car, and you want to have the latest Mercedes and all those different things. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But at the same time, we've never learned to invest that money back into our community. We've never learned to say, hey, guess what? If when money circulates in the community, everyone becomes wealthy. And most of our stars may not realize that. Our basketball stars may not realize that if they put that same money they spent on that car, that this money they spent on that jewelry, all of a sudden you have just educated 1,000 to 2,000 Black children.
Mm.
But yes, that's part of the trauma. Guess what? I couldn't have it before, but I made it, and now I can get that Mercedes that I wanted. I can get that huge mansion that I want. I can wear the latest shoes, or because sometimes you see some of these football stars and basketball stars who have an entire closet of different types of shoes, just one closet,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, nothing. Again, nothing is wrong with it, but just how many shoes can you wear? Just how many shoes can you wear? And that,
Exactly. Eh,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I'm saying exactly. And Dr. Naeem Akbar calls that an unnatural. We have an unnatural, he said, attraction to material objects.
Yes.
Um, and he also talked about this. I'm on page 8, and he says we have uncomfortable. He says large sums of money are thrown away yearly on expensive, flashy clothes and cars. How many? I mean, you know how Black folks are. And like I said, I'm from Baltimore, so we could be living in the hood. We could be living in the hood,
Tell the truth.
but you'll see a Lexus. You go to the hood, you'll see a Lexus. You see Jaguars,
Mhm.
and I'm talking about top of the line Lexus too. I ain't talking about shabby Lexus. So you go to the hood, you'll see Lexus, you'll see Jaguars, and we are in the hood. I'm talking about in
Yes.
the hood of Baltimore. So he said that large sums of, or look, we have Gucci, we have Louis. Our
Yep.
children have the
Yep.
latest sneakers.
Yep.
You know what kills me, Sister Alima? It was crazy to me how many parents during the pandemic said that they didn't have the internet in their homes. They didn't have laptops in their homes. They didn't have books or materials to educate their babies, but
Mhm.
their children had the latest Jordans. They had True
Wow.
Religion jeans and
Right.
all of the name brand clothing, but we don't have the basic things that we needed in our homes to educate our babies. So anyway, he says that large sums of money are thrown away yearly on expensive, flashy clothes and cars.
Mm.
Uncomfortable, impractical, and showy items of furniture drain our budgets and fail to satisfy our longings because of this persistent wish to look like the slave master. Many of our judgments about people and their worth are disproportionately determined by what those people own and wear. How many times, sis, when we was growing up, when we were younger, when we were looking at a guy, the first thing we used to look at his feet.
Mhm.
Remember that?
What type
Let
of
me
shit?
see what the brother has. Oh, I know that's just what we used to do. Let me look at this brother feet and see what he got on, and then we looking from the feet up. So you judge it. Yeah, so you judging the brother from the feet up instead of judging them here. from here, from the head down. You get what I'm saying? And so, like he said, we judge people based on what they own or what they wear. He says we spend great energy and wealth acquiring these objects associated with power rather than acquiring real human, social, political, and economic power. We would rather look good. We would rather look like we have power. We would rather look like we're wealthy rather than acquire wealth and power. We would rather look the part instead of be the part.
And
that's real.
That's what we've been doing for generation upon generation upon generation, is looking the part and having little to show for it. And the sad thing is, it seemed like, I don't know, after around the 60s or something, it's like when everything started to go downhill. You know what I mean? Because before then, it's like it seemed like the ancestors, they understood certain things were necessary, and they understood that you needed to have land, and you need to have this, and you need to have that. But today we don't value those simple basics, Queen. We really don't.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Again, that goes back to our culture. You know, back in the 60s, we had no choice but to stay together.
Right.
We had no choice. I forgot what author said that, but he said that the black doctor had to stay in the same neighborhood the black janitor did. So they had no choice but to work together. But now we're kind of separated in our own little silos, and we don't realize that we need to work together. And I got to add something to what you said, Dr. Maat. What you said, this reminded me of something that Barbara Sizemore did. In one of Barbara Sizemore's lectures, she spoke about how they were trying to raise money for a young girl to go to college, and the women in her meeting said, "Well, we don't have that kind of money. We don't have that kind of money. We can't do it." And so at the next meeting, Dr. Sizemore went out and wrote down the license plates of all the cars outside. She said, "Ladies, all these white people have these cars parked out in front of our houses. Those car payments can't be there are car payments of $200 and $300. How do they just park their cars in front of our homes?" She forced them to realize that you've got the money, but you're spending it on other things. Let's send this young girl to college.
Wow.
I love Dr. Sizemore. I love her. So sometimes we need to be forced to realize, hey, guess what? We have the money. It's time that we do what we need to do to take care of our children and our future.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and I'll continue in the next paragraph, right below what you just read, Dr. Maat. It said it is not unusual for concerned efforts to obtain real political and economic power to be prematurely aborted by strategic dispensation of tokens. That's for real right there. So in other words, we protest, we riot, and the government comes back to us and says, hey, guess what? We're as a matter of fact, this is what's going on right now. Everyone's standing with us in solidarity, and we're going to commit $10 million to help the Black community. But does that $10 million actually get to the Black community, or is it built in some rec center? Does it really help build the neighborhood? It's just not a rec center. Does it really help getting Black children educated and employed so they can stay out of trouble? We don't want token progress anymore.
That's right. Enough of that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm so over that at this point. Like,
not at all.
We're not actually talking about correcting generations of damage that you have done here. Then I don't want to hear that shit.
Exactly.
Exactly, Queen. So moving on to leadership, family. He talked about natural leadership and unnatural leadership and natural leadership. And so he was saying that, the slave masters understood that in order for them to hold on to power, they had to prevent that he calls it indigenous leadership. So leadership from among the slaves. So he had to prevent that. So people who rebelled, they did certain things to them. They were brought in front of the people on the plantation, and they were beat. They were called uppity slaves. They were called rebellious slaves. And so in order to control our ancestors and to exert power over them, they had to make sure that they neutralize anyone who became or any possibility of someone to spring up as a leader. Okay, as a leader. And so he talked about how it got to the point where our ancestors started viewing natural leaders as being uppity and troublemakers. And he's saying that people, and he started talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, and he said, well, Dr. Martin Luther King didn't become a leader amongst Black people until he was approved by the white establishment. And then we said, okay, that can be our leader. So he talks about how that comes from slavery, that stems from slavery, where the master may pick a leader, but this is a leader that was picked by the master. And he calls it manufactured leadership, and so it would be a leader that was trained by the master, a leader that was approved by the master. And so the master would bring that person in front of you for you to follow. So he's saying that we still saw that, throughout Black history. He mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King, and then he also mentioned Elijah Muhammad. He said Elijah Muhammad wasn't approved by white media, or he didn't get white approval. So therefore, Elijah Muhammad never became, a Black leader in a sense. He wasn't accepted by the entire Black community because he wasn't accepted by the white community. What are your thoughts on that, panel?
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll read the second paragraph on page 9, it's just like what you were saying. It says, these people were carefully picked, trained, and tested to stand only for the master's welfare. That's politics right there.
That's
politics
all day long.
Yeah, we can see over and over again, even the NAACP and all the rest of the different organizations we will name, how they accept token progress, how they kowtow to whatever the money says to do, and they do not want they're not trying to free the people, and it to me it's infuriating. You're just like, yeah, but that's the gist of it.
Yep, I definitely agree with you that it is politics. When I think about these political figures in Baltimore, there's a young brother who just won the Democratic nomination. I think his name is Brandon Scott. He's 29 years old. And, I got some inside information that he's already been, bought and paid for. That's what they said. He's already been bought and paid for. He's 29, and they're really trying to put him in a position. And, so we're looking at it like, oh, he's a young Black man. We want to support him. But what I also heard, and I'm not going to put it out because, like I said, it was an insider. I also heard that Brandon Scott has already hired a person from Martin O'Malley's regime. And if anyone from Baltimore, anyone keeps up with Baltimore City Mayor O'Malley locked up 108,000 Black men. He ran Baltimore like it was I'm looking for the word, Brother Kanoum. It was like a police state in a sense. And so under O'Malley's term, 108,000 Black men were locked up. And so he went and got someone from his camp to help him run Baltimore.
Wow.
And so, like you said, these people that they put in front of us or put in these political positions have already been, as you stated, carefully picked, trained, and tested to stand only for the master's welfare. So they're not coming. These political figures aren't coming to empower, to liberate and empower Black people. They're coming to pacify Black people and to maintain the status quo.
Yes.
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely. And I also, in this section, I thought about J. Edgar Hoover, because, we were talking about natural and unnatural leadership. Remember, J. Edgar Hoover said there will never be another Black Messiah unless we create one, So I'm thinking about J. Edgar Hoover. I thought about the different tactics that they employed to neutralize the Black Panther Party, how they murdered Fred Hampton. So you see what they do to natural leadership. They neutralize it. And then when we think about the war on drugs and all that crap, when they flooded the Black community with drugs in the 80s, what I believe, and this is just my theory, that it was definitely to destroy the Black community, but to also destroy any potential, that the Black community had, any potential for real leadership. Let's just neutralize them. Let's flood their communities with drugs, to neutralize them. So let's eliminate the threat of power, of effective leadership. Let's get it when they're young. You know what I mean? Let's pour the drugs into the community and let's neutralize them fast. And so I think that that's also why drugs was poured into the Black community. And then he
Queen.
I'm sorry, I'm looking on page 10 and page 11 and how he talks about how we look to celebrities as leaders. He says we look for them as leaders. You talk about it all the time, sis.
Queen. Before we get off that last
Queen?
topic, can you hear me, Queen? Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you.
Sister Lima, can you hear me?
I think she has a delay on her end.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a slight delay this time.
Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So what was
yes
I before that? You was talking about
yes.
Oh God, I done lost my thought now, sis.
Yes.
It's all good. It's all good.
But nevertheless, as far as celebrity wise, you already know how I feel about that. You know, I feel that we would need some type of celebrity or something because it seems like the only type of people that our people as a whole seem to respect nowadays, and they're just so interested in their opinions and they follow them for every single word. So it seems like we would need someone like Jay-Z or whoever and all of these type of people that they are so obsessed with in order to facilitate some type of leadership. But these people are not built for that. So that's the issue. They're not built for that. They working with some of the structures that are designed to bring our people down. So that's not going to work. So as far as leadership goes, I don't know what it would take or what type of person would actually be able to break through like people in the past, like Martin Luther King or like a Malcolm X. I'm not sure what it would take for someone to get to that level nowadays. It's hard to break through.
Yep, no, Cardi B. They follow Cardi B. Cardi B is the leader.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, Cardi B and right. Megan Thee Stallion and the baby and little baby. And so when something happens, like I was even thinking about the light-skinned dude Don Lemon, the journalist who when all of the riots happened, he said, "Where are the celebrities? Where are the celebrities?" And I was sitting there thinking, what? We want to hear from the celebrities. Who the hell want to hear from the celebrities? And I'm glad Dave Chappelle on his on Dave Chappelle's stand-up. Yeah, on his stand-up 846, he said when people are going through stuff, why do you think, and he addressed Don Lemon, he said, why do you think when people are going through things that they want to hear from celebrities? But that's because we're in a state where we honestly look to celebrities for leadership. And it's sad. And Malcolm X, there's a video online where he talks about how black celebrities should not be viewed as leaders. He said, you don't see that, black celebrities. He said, you don't see that in other communities where they look to their entertainers, their athletes, their singers, their rappers to be leaders. You don't see that in other communities. And Baba Malcolm X talks about that.
But that goes back to Master still being in control. Master still in control. He will fund the black person. I always use the example of Shannon Sharp. Shannon Sharp only does football, but whatever that station he works for, Fox News or whatever, Disney, whatever, they give him the platform to speak for black people. And every time he says something, I'm like, hey, who is this fool? Whether he's right or wrong is irrelevant. Who allowed him to give that, have that power to speak for black people?
Right.
So we have to question those people. It's like, hey, you don't speak for me. And I say that to everybody. And anytime I see these stars speak up, I'm like, they don't speak for me because the system has set them in place to speak that. Just like you said about Lemon, the system has put him in place to be able to speak and say those different things. And that just proves that they're the wrong leaders.
Absolutely. So then he moves on to talk about the clown. He said the clown. He said writers have long pointed to the jester, the clown, or the fool as the inferior one who was responsible for making his superior laugh. Using a person for your clown has always been one of the major ways to assert your dominance over a person. Mockery is one of the most sophisticated forms of humiliation. What are your thoughts on that, panel?
Oh my, that's the one. Can you hear me?
Yes, great mother.
That is what I responded to because you couldn't hear me at first. Last night, I watched Melvin Van Peebles. Um, it's called the Classic X. And he showed everything that Dr. Naim Akbar said about the clown from the 1930s, the 1960s, and how they were dumbed down. They had to entertain for the massa or the misses. They would put their clothes on, and it just resonated. And then I read that part in the book. That was so painful to know how our people are psychologically warped and worn down, because it's still happening today. It's still happening today. They out there clowning, entertaining, buck dancing, and doing all that, and it's really a sad affair. I put some words in the chat. I lost my book. I don't know what I did with my book. So somebody can carry on. I found it. Yeah. Yeah. But it was just a really sad affair that we are so psychologically dumbed down, and that we can't. It's like there's no ability to break through. Not to breaking the chain on some of us, not all of us. Now, all of us are not lost, but there are a lot of us that are, and no matter what you say, they're not going to believe you, and that's the problem. Believe, everybody wants to believe and not know. They don't want to research. They don't believe in, not believe, but they don't want to use that energy because they're going off of what another person said. Right. It's just like, you all might have heard of this once. There was a lady, which I don't eat this, but anyway, she had a ham. Her daughter was cooking a ham, and she asked her mom, why did she cut the end off of it? She said, I don't know, call grandma and ask her. So she called her grandmother. She said, because the ham was too big to put in the pot. In the pan. So, people don't really find out. They don't ask questions. They figure that they're not supposed. You don't question this and you don't question that. And the minds are so diluted and conditioned to a severe place, to a sunken, dry place. It's just like dead, flatline. Okay, I'm done.
No, great mother. We love to hear you speak, great mother. Yes. Absolutely.
That was great.
Absolutely. And so like you said, great mother, I mean, like, what were your thoughts on the fiddler? You said it's always these characters, great mother, the fiddler and the comic and, just the buffoonery,
That to me, that's pleasing the master, pleasing him. And for them, and like it said in the book, so they'd rather please him than, for him to be angry with them. So they're going to do their darndest, it's like, yes, master. Yeah. Like what was that? Malcolm X said, our house burned. Yeah. No, he said, my house is burning. Our house is burning. Everything is about them. Nothing personalized, and it's about taking care of the master. And I just think that it's the buffoonery and all the comic and everything. It to me, it may have masked their pain too, for them not to be whipped and demonized and hurt. I got to perform very well for the master and for the missus. Because
no, go ahead, mama. Go ahead, mama. I didn't mean to cut your wisdom. Go ahead, mama.
Okay, for them not to whip me, not to take my children, because if I don't make them laugh, if I don't entertain them, I'm hit. And my family too.
So like you said, mama, the clown, the entertainer. When I thought about that, I even thought about football players. Exactly. I thought about football players and how they are they're playing the fiddler. They're the fiddler too. When I think about these entertainers and athletes, they're the fiddlers. And I might lose some folks in the chat because you can't talk about Tyler Perry. As soon as you talk about Tyler Perry, Dr. Maat, how could you talk about Tyler Perry?
Right.
He built that beautiful studio down in Atlanta. He named all of the stages after Black actors and actresses. He hired a lot of Black star. He made a lot of stars. He made a lot of stars, and he also hired, he also revived the careers of stars who weren't getting roles. And I appreciate Tyler Perry for that. I do.
Yes.
Can we honestly, can we admit something? He really made fun at Black culture. I used to be like, man, I didn't understand how Christians could stomach watching some of his movies because he was making fun of the Black church.
Yes.
He was making fun. He also made fun of how Black Southern people speak.
Yep.
He made fun of our dialects. He made fun of like I said, the Black church, the singing, pastors. He made fun of Black people. That's how he amassed the millions, all while doing it and addressing a wig. And so can we call that out too? So we look at what he did. Oh, he did this, but can we also say that he's also a fiddler? He's a fiddler.
I was thinking the same thing about the Wayans brothers. The Wayans brothers too came to mind to me when you talk about.
Oh, you're right.
A lot of people want to talk about how their family is inspirational. I'm like, yeah, but they got famous off the stereotypes. You know what I mean? Upplaying the stereotypes of Black people and colored people like that. That's how they got famous. All them like that. Everything that they've ever done is like that. It's over exaggeration, over the top of Black people stereotypes. So I mean, yeah, that's what I thought of, Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what else? My sister, my elder sister, which Dr. Maya, made her transition. It'll be a year on the 27th. And it was years ago before I came into knowledge of self. And she was never indoctrinated. I don't know how that happened, but I'm grateful. And I was talking about Tyler Perry one day, and she said, "Why do you watch that?" I said, "Because he's funny." She said, "He talking about your mother and your grandmother,
Yeah.
And it took me a minute for that to sink in, but I got it.
Oh yeah, he, like Sister Alima said, like an over exaggeration. You know what I mean? And absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And as we're discussing this and everything, it makes me realize that we need some undercover entertainers that are woke, that do their work silently and behind the scenes, so that Massa doesn't see what's going on. I realize that we need some people that need to be awakened and show that, hey, we need to do some things for the Black community. If you need to do like the Wazungu do and pump it through a secondary company, then we might have to do that.
I like that. A lot.
We might have to do like the Wazungu and put your money into like a secondary company, and then let that company fund the Black schools or the different politicians that we need to put in place.
Absolutely. So moving on to personal inferiority.
I can get there.
Yeah, I got here to personal inferiority, where he talks about how Black people, we have inferiority complex and where that stems from. And he talked about how the different tactics that they employed on the plantation to create a sense of inferiority. He said they humiliated us. Public beatings, parading our ancestors on slave blocks, unclothed, and inspecting them as though they were cattle or horses. Forbidding them to communicate with other enslaved people, right? Which also would have been a basis for maintaining self-respect, right? And it talked about how young children were separated from mothers and how a mother's love might cultivate some self-respect in a child. He talked about cleanliness and personal effectiveness. And he said that that's essential in the maintenance of self-respect. We were kept filthy. And he says the very nature of physical restraints over long periods of time began to develop in the people's sense of helplessness. So we couldn't even clean our own bodies.
Right.
We couldn't clean our own bodies. We were dehumanized. We were beat. And I mean, we could talk about buck breaking also. You know, there were things that
Yes.
transpired on the plantation, buck breaking. Look at what they did to the male African. I call them African captives because I hate saying slaves. We
Okay.
were really captives in a sense. I know that we
Yeah.
had like the word slave in our vernacular, but our ancestors were really captives in a sense. You know, yeah, they were prisoners of war. They were POWs. They were
That's right.
captives. And so you guys, you got to bear with me. I'm working on trying to just remove that because when you say slave, it's so dehumanizing, you know, and so you say slave, you can't really detach a feeling to a slave. But when you say, you know, like I was telling my kids, I said, when you say that someone's mother was beat, someone's sister was beat, someone's father was hung, I can feel it. You get what I'm saying? When you just say the slave, what is that? And so it's even calling them slaves, in my opinion, is dehumanizing. But anyway,
They were forced to be.
absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. You know, and so, you know, he said that they used all of these different tactics to create a sense of inferiority within us. And I just want to read this paragraph right here on the bottom of page 14. He says, these things combined with insults, the loss of cultural traditions, rituals, family life, religion, and even names serve to cement the loss of self-respect. As the slave master exalted himself and enforced respect of himself, he was increasingly viewed as superior to the slaves. The superiority was based on the utter dehumanization of the Africans. The slave was forced to bow and bend to the slave owner and treat him as God, with the image of a Caucasian man, even as God, and with all kinds of images of Africans as dirty and only half human. It was inevitable that a sense of inferiority would grow into the African American personality.
Wow.
Yes. Wow.
You know, and then think about that. He goes on to talk about the whole dark skin as being unattractive, and, you know, C4 hair, kinky hair is not being good hair. You know, in the Black community, that so and so got that good hair. You know, so the looser the coils, the finer the hair, the gooder the hair, right? You know, so and so got pretty hair. You know, so just even looking at African features. Or the African phenotype, and we have multiple types. Africans don't look just one way. I mean, you guys got to take a trip over there. It just kind of depends on, you know, where you are on the continent. But he was saying that, you know, features that are contributed to African people are viewed as unattractive. You know, and then again, we have internalized that and we perpetuate that in our families, in our communities, even songs that we listen to, rap, R&B, we perpetuate that stuff. And then we send our children to the school system. And so they also get a sense of, a sense, or foster a sense of inferiority when you matriculate through the school, because you don't learn about who you are. And so you're sitting in the classroom, you're learning about George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Christopher Columbus, World War I, World War II, the Revolutionary War, and all of this. And then you learn so little about yourself. So even matriculating through the K-12 school system will give us or will perpetuate that inferiority complex.
May I say this, because I have to go pick my grandson up, and I'm going to have to catch this on the later. You know, I just want to share, as we were talking about and speaking of the different personalities, all that we have discussed so far. I just want to share with you all. When I first came into knowledge of self, you know, I like to grow garden, I mow the lawn, I do all that kind of stuff. The only way that I can describe this is that I have a diaspora ailment. And what I mean by that, I can visually see our people getting mistreated the way that they have. I was mowing my lawn in the backyard. I could see a mother and the children picking cotton. I could see when it's cold and I get cold. I could see when they throw them out in the cold, all the inhumane treatment that they've done. I feel it. I can see it spiritually. And that's, again, my sister asked me to have the ancestors to show me more positive things. And I have been doing that. But from time to time, I still go through that. And it is painful, you know, and I can see when their fingers are cut off. I mean, really see it. I see it all. That's why I call it an ailment, a diaspora ailment, the things that were done to them. When the sister, the queen, was on the ship and they cut her belly open, she was pregnant, and put her up on the stern and cut her belly open and threw the baby over because she wouldn't have sex with the captain.
Mm.
Mm.
I see those things. I don't like them. I don't desire them. And yet I'm going to ask them again, the good ancestors, why am I seeing this? What are you trying to convey to me? You know? Um, but it's not as much as it used to be because I'm engaging more with Dr. Maya, the Amin Ross classes, the Queen of Lima, everybody that's putting more substance, but I still see it. So I love you all so much, and I'm going to go pick my grandson up now.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we're getting ready to close out. Great Mother. We've been on for 1 hour. We're not. I mean, it's a lot of material. We actually discussed half of part one, psychological legacy of slavery. So we will be back next week to finish part one. Please join us back here at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same place, same channel, family. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so that as soon as I go live or I publish a video, you will be notified. Also, please subscribe to Lily La Poete Speaks. Lily La Poete Speaks. She has an awesome YouTube channel. Subscribe to her channel and also visit her website, lilylapoetespeaks.com. She has a lot of beautiful blogs. She has merchandise on her website for sale. So please visit lilylapoetespeaks.com and also subscribe to Lily La Poete Speaks YouTube channel. Does anyone else have any closing words, panel? Any closing words?
Everybody be safe this week as you carry on throughout the week with work and your family. Be safe, and don't forget, it's still a pandemic out here.
That's right.
I just want to add real quick to CK the poet. If the ancestors have given you the vision of past sight, they also have given you the vision of foresight, so you can see what's coming in the future as well. But I want to just say peace and power, and thank you for allowing me to be on the panel.
Thank you for allowing me as well to be on the panel. This is a real encouragement. And I promise I won't put nothing else when you send in message. I'm not touching it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So everyone, please have a productive and safe week. We love you. Peace and power.
Peace and power. Stay healthy.